She carried life inside her for 9 long months, dreaming of the tiny fingers that would wrap around hers, the laughter that would one day fill her room, the footsteps that would follow her wherever she went. Every kick reminded her that she was not alone. Every night, she whispered promises into the darkness. But when the baby was finally born, life demanded a choice she never imagined she would have to make. A choice that felt like survival, but tasted like loss. She left her child alone. She walked out of that hospital with empty arms and a heart that felt heavier than her entire body. She believed her story ended there. But fate had other plans. Amara was barely 23 when she realized her life had changed forever. The pregnancy test sat on the edge of her cracked sink in that tiny room in Ajagunal, and she stared at it until the lines blurred. There was no husband waiting at home, no parents to call for help, no savings hidden away for emergencies. Just a small room with peeling walls, unpaid rent notices slipped under the door, and a future that already felt like it was slipping through her fingers. At first, she cried in silence, pressing her face into her thin pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Then she prayed, long prayers in Igbo, the language her mother had taught her before she died. And then she learned to talk to the baby growing inside her, because that was the only place she felt heard. She promised warmth when the nights were cold. She promised love even when food was scarce. She promised a future she herself did not understand how to create. As her belly grew, so did the fear. She worked at the Balagan market, selling tomatoes and peppers under the brutal Lagos sun. People stared at her swelling stomach. Some whispered behind her back. Some judged her openly. Others offered pity instead of help, which somehow felt worse. Her landlord threatened eviction. Her boss at the market reduced her hours. The father of her child had disappeared the moment she told him the news. Every day felt like walking with a stone on her chest, the weight growing heavier as her body grew rounder. Still, she carried the pregnancy with care. She ate less so the baby could have more. She walked slowly, protecting her body, protecting the life inside. And in doing so, she slowly realized a painful truth that kept her awake at night. Love alone would not be enough. She could not afford milk. She could not afford medicine. She could barely afford the room she lived in. How could she raise a child when she could not even take care of herself? By the time labor approached, she had already made the hardest decision of her life, one she would never say out loud, not even to herself, because saying it would make it too real. Someone else would raise her child. Someone stronger. Someone more stable. Someone with what she did not have. All she could do was hope that fate would be kinder to her baby than life had been to her. She prayed to God. She prayed to her mother's spirit. She prayed to anything listening that her child would survive what she could not provide. And then the contractions began. The Lagos Island General Hospital was crowded and loud, filled with the sounds of crying babies, exhausted mothers, and nurses moving quickly between beds. But in that moment, when they placed the baby in her arms, the world went silent. The hospital room was quiet in a way that felt cruel. Machines hummed softly. Curtains barely moved. Outside, Lagos continued its chaos. Danfos honking, generators rumbling, hawkers shouting. But inside those walls, time slowed to something unbearable. When the baby cried for the first time, Amara's heart broke open. She held the child against her chest, memorizing the warmth, the smell, the impossibly soft skin. She counted fingers, 10 perfect ones. She traced the tiny face with trembling hands, noticing how the baby had her nose, her father's lips, a combination of two people who would never be a family. This was the moment she had dreamed of through 9 months of fear and loneliness. And the moment she feared the most. Time felt cruelly short. The nurse, Sister Patience, her name tag said, moved gently around the room, sensing something unspoken in Amara's eyes. The older woman had seen this before, too many times, the look of a mother who knew she could not keep her child. Amara kissed her daughter's forehead once, twice, 3 times. She whispered in Igbo, "Chinik gozi gi, and wam, Baiko chekwaya." God bless you, my child. Please protect her. When the moment came, she handed the baby to Sister Patience, whose eyes were kind enough not to ask questions, wise enough to understand what words could not express. Amara's lips moved in prayer, but no sound came out. Every part of her wanted to scream, to run, to take the baby back and disappear into the world together. They could survive somehow, couldn't they? People had survived worse, hadn't they? But fear held her feet still. Reality held her heart captive. She signed nothing. She said little. When Sister Patience asked for her name, she gave it, Amara Okafor, and then she simply walked away. Step by step, down the corridor that seemed to stretch forever. Past doors that closed softly behind her. Past other mothers holding their babies, their futures secure. Out of the hospital with arms that felt painfully light, as if she had left part of her body behind. The rain had started by the time she reached the street. She stood there, letting it soak through her clothes, mixing with the tears she could no longer hold back. She did not look back. Looking back would destroy her. She did not know it then, but the child she left behind would not be forgotten. Sister Patience would not send the baby to an overcrowded orphanage or into a broken system. The nurse would take the child home, would name her Chioma, God is good, would raise her as her own. Fate had already begun to work. But Amara didn't know this. All she knew was the emptiness in her arms and the guilt that would follow her like a shadow for the rest of her life. Studio Microphone CTA, soft, story-driven. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe to AfriTales by Naomi, where African stories of love, pain, and quiet strength are told with honesty and soul. The baby survived. Not by miracle alone, but by the quiet intervention of strangers whose paths crossed at exactly the right time, whose hearts opened at exactly the right moment. Sister Patience took Chioma home to her house in Surulere. She was a widow, her own children grown and living abroad, and she had been praying for purpose to fill the emptiness her husband's death had left behind. This baby was her answer. There were moments of sickness in those early years. Fevers that spiked in the night, a bout of malaria when Chioma was 2, moments when Sister Patience sat by her bedside praying the same prayers Amara had prayed. Moments of uncertainty, moments when the future hung by a thin thread. But each time, help arrived unexpectedly. A nurse who stayed longer than required, checking on them even after her shift ended. A neighbor who brought herbs and remedies passed down through generations. A doctor at the hospital who waived fees when he saw how much the child was loved. The child grew, slowly at first, then stronger, steadier, more vibrant. By the time Chioma was 7, she was attending St. Agnes Primary School, her uniform always clean, her homework always done. Sister Patience made sure of it. The old nurse worked extra shifts, sewed clothes for neighbors, did whatever it took to give Chioma the life Amara had dreamed of but could not provide. Chioma was bright and curious, always asking questions, always drawing pictures of families with big houses and many children. She had friends who loved her, teachers who saw her potential, and a mother, because that's what Sister Patience was, who believed she could be anything. Meanwhile, across Lagos in Ajagunal, the mother lived with a silence that never left her. Amara had moved from selling in the market to managing a small corner shop for Mom Ngozi. The work was steadier, the pace slightly better, enough to move to a room with fewer leaks, fewer rats. She survived, but she did not truly live. Every birthday passed with quiet tears. March 15th, the date burned into her memory like a brand. Every child's laugh in the street felt like a reminder of what she had lost. Every question, what if, followed her like a shadow she could not outrun. She never searched, not because she didn't care. God knows she cared so much it hurt to breathe sometimes. But because she feared discovering that her sacrifice had been in vain. She feared finding her daughter in poverty, in suffering, in the very situation she had tried to prevent. It was easier to imagine her daughter happy, somewhere far away, with people who could give her everything. She carried her regret like a scar, hidden beneath her clothes, invisible to the world, but always felt. At night, she would light a candle and pray. She didn't know if her daughter was alive or dead, happy or suffering, but she prayed anyway because it was the only connection she had left. "Please let her be safe," she whispered into the darkness. "Please let her know I loved her. Please let my sacrifice mean something." And somewhere in Surulere, Chioma slept peacefully in a comfortable bed, surrounded by love, protected by fate, never knowing that her birth mother was praying for her under the same Lagos sky. Life has a way of weaving paths together without permission, of creating connections invisible to the naked eye. When Chioma was 15, Sister Patience's health began to fail. The woman was in her 70s now, and her heart was giving out. She knew her time was limited, and she made preparations, legal papers, a small savings account, and a brown envelope containing the truth about Chioma's origins. She told Chioma the story one quiet Sunday afternoon. "You came to me in the most unexpected way," Sister Patience said, holding Chioma's hand. "Your mother loved you so much that she gave you up, so you could have a better life. That kind of love is rare, my dear. That kind of sacrifice is sacred." Chioma cried, but not from anger. She cried because she finally understood the empty space she had always felt, the questions she had been afraid to ask. "Do you want to find her?" Sister Patience asked gently. "Maybe one day," Chioma said. "But right now, you are my mother. That's enough." 3 months later, Sister Patience died peacefully in her sleep, leaving Chioma alone but not unprepared. The house was in Chioma's name. There was money for university. There were friends from church who checked on her. And there was that brown envelope with a name written inside, Amara Okafor. Years later, the mother would sometimes see a familiar face in a crowd. Amara was 46 now, her hair streaked with gray, her hands rough from years of work. She was at the market one Saturday when she saw a young woman, maybe 23, the same age Amara had been when she gave birth, buying vegetables with confidence and grace. Something about the woman's face stirred something deep in Amara's chest. A smile that looked like hers. A way of holding her head that felt familiar. Eyes that could have been her own at that age. She never approached. She never spoke. She watched from a distance as the young woman laughed with the vendor, paid for her items, and walked away into the crowd. Was it her? Could it be? Amara would never know for certain. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe her daughter had survived. Maybe she had thrived. Maybe the sacrifice had been worth it after all. The child, now a woman, found guidance where it mattered most. Chioma was studying medicine at the University of Lagos, determined to help people the way Sister Patience had helped her. She volunteered at clinics in poor neighborhoods, treating patients who reminded her of the mother she had never known, women who were alone, afraid, making impossible choices. She found friendship when loneliness threatened, joining a community of other medical students who became her chosen family. She found opportunity when doors seemed closed, receiving scholarships and grants that appeared just when she needed them most, as if fate itself was clearing her path. Each success felt like both a blessing and a mystery. Sister Patience had always said, "God has a plan for you, Chioma. You were meant to survive. You were meant to matter." And Chioma was beginning to believe it. Because knowing your child is safe does not erase the ache of absence, but sometimes, from a distance, a mother can see that her sacrifice was not in vain. And sometimes that has to be enough. Studio microphone CTA. What happens next will bring tears to your eyes. But before we continue, subscribe to AfriTales by Naomi. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in second chances and the power of love. Hit that like button if the story is touching your soul. Don't miss how this journey ends. They never stood face to face. There was no dramatic moment in a crowded street where their eyes met and recognition flooded through them like lightning. No public forgiveness played out for witnesses to applaud. No tearful embrace that tied everything together in a perfect bow. But there was peace. It came slowly, like dawn breaking over Lagos, gradual, inevitable, gentle. Chioma graduated from medical school at 26, and on that day, she wore Sister Patience's necklace and carried the brown envelope in her bag. She had opened it years ago, had memorized the name written inside, Amara Okafor. She had made inquiries, quiet ones, asking around in Ajagunal, following threads that led nowhere and everywhere at once. She learned that a woman named Amara worked at Mama Ngozi's shop, that she was quiet, hardworking, alone. Chioma went to the shop one afternoon, not to confront, but to see. She bought soap and matches, items she didn't need, just to stand close enough to study the woman behind the counter, to see if she could find herself in this stranger's face. Amara counted out her change with hands that trembled slightly. She looked tired, worn by life, but there was something in her eyes, a sadness, yes, but also a quiet strength. "Thank you," Chioma said softly. Amara looked up, and for just a moment, their eyes met. Something passed between them, not recognition, but something deeper. A knowing without knowledge. A connection that needed no words. "You're welcome," Amara whispered. Chioma left the shop and never returned.
She didn't need to.
She had seen what she needed to see, that her mother had survived, that she carried her burden with dignity, that she was not a villain, but a woman who had made an impossible choice out of love. And that was enough. The mother grew older, softer, quieter. Amara was 52 when Mama Ngozi finally retired and left her the shop. It wasn't wealth, but it was security, something she had never known before. She hired a young girl to help, a girl with a baby and no support, and she paid her fairly, taught her the business, gave her what no one had given Amara all those years ago, a chance. She learned to live with what she could not change. She learned that some love does not need recognition to be real. Some nights, she still whispered into the darkness, but the words had changed. "I did not fail you. I loved you the only way I could. And fate carried you where I could not." The child, now grown, never spoke her name. But Chioma lived a life shaped by the sacrifice Amara made. She opened a clinic in Ajagunal, offering free care to pregnant women who had nowhere else to turn. She held their hands when they were afraid. She helped them find resources. She never judged. And when they thanked her, tears in their eyes, she thought of a woman she had seen once in a shop, a woman who had given her life not once but twice, once in birth and once in letting go. And that was enough. Because not all love is rewarded with reunion. Not all sacrifices are witnessed by the world. But some choices echo quietly through time, shaping lives in ways we may never see, creating ripples that touch shores we will never visit. Amara's daughter survived. She thrived. She became a healer, a helper, a woman who turned her pain into purpose. And though they never spoke, though they never embraced, though the world never knew their connection, fate had done its work. The baby abandoned at birth had become exactly who she was meant to be. And the mother who walked away had given the greatest gift a parent can give, a future. Studio microphone final CTA, gentle, channel branded. Thank you for listening to this story on AfriTales by Naomi. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe because some African stories are meant to be felt, not forgotten. Every week, we bring you tales that honor our struggles, our choices, and our strength. Don't miss the next story. Subscribe now to AfriTales by Naomi.